Bling blong, everyone. Our new podcast miniseries, Talking Mission Hill, is now exclusively on Patreon.
Put on your spicy pants every Friday with a new podcast covering each episode of the cult series from Simpsons legends Bill Oakley and Josh Weinstein.
$5 subscribers at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons can hear every episode, plus all of our previous miniseries about Futurama, King of the Hill, and The Critic.
So don't be a Beardsley. Sign up for Talking Mission Hill today.
Cartoons from present in the past. Every week will be an animated bash. What a cartoon! What a cartoon! Maybe a short but mostly shows. We'll talk, we'll analyze, exploring as we go. What a cartoon! What a cartoon! What a cartoon! What a cartoon!
Hello, everybody, and welcome to What a Cartoon, recorded someplace between there and here. I am one of your hosts, Hideous Mascot, voiced by Frank Welker, Bob Mackey, and this is an audio exploration of every cartoon ever who is here with me today.
Hey, it's Henry Gilbert, and hey, look, a Dungeons & Dragons ride!
Oh, wow, and who do we have on the line?
Epic Level podcast host Devin Hofarth, and I don't write anything that gives milk.
That's a good philosophy to have, and today's podcast is all about the Dungeons & Dragons episode, The Night of No Tomorrow.
Look, there! It's Tiamat the dragon!
Who dares awaken me?
So welcome to the show, Devin. You are one of our top-tier patrons. This means you got to pick this episode and be one of our co-hosts for this episode, and this is a great pick of a cartoon that is, I think, legendary to everyone that's older than us, who actually saw it on Saturday mornings.
Right. Funny story is that I actually saw this on Saturday mornings as well, although it was obviously in syndication on the Fox Kids channel.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah. I wondered what your history was with it, because we are slightly older than you, and we were too young for this show when it premiered. So, do you have a history with Dungeons & Dragons as well, Devin?
Oh, definitely. I've been playing D&D ever since basically middle school. Yeah, I played it with my friends, and we all would just sit around, and that was pretty much how I would spend all of my, lunches pretty much, for all of middle school and high school. It was just D&D all the time.
Man, I gotta say, I think of you as a lucky boy, because my group was not allowed to play during lunchtime and in our middle school and high school.
Gonna summon all those demons during lunchtime.
Yeah, no.
I mean, it's kind of insane that I was able to do it, because I live in basically the Bible Belt of Canada, and there was, some pushback from some of the teachers thinking, is this, gambling paraphernalia and all that? And yeah.
I'm jealous of both of you, because I was basically, throughout all my schooling, the sole type of nerd that I was, and no one was down with that. I was just so alone, and I would read about role-playing games that weren't video games, and I would actually buy the rule books and stuff, just thinking wow, what if I could play this one day? And I think I played one game of Dungeons & Dragons with my stepdad, and that was it. One session, rather, one sit-down session. So this has been completely lost to me, this world of tabletop stuff, and only recently, within the past, I don't know, 15 years have I got into board games, but that's as far as it's gone. But I do respect role-playing games of this kind.
Yeah, and I mean, I've been not playing them recently, sadly, but, I have been playing a good number of tabletop games for a good portion of my life. D&D was obviously the first one, but then I also transitioned into games like Mutants and Masterminds, which is sort of the same thing but with superheroes. Ooh. And games like Fellowship and Powered by the Apocalypse games. And especially World of Darkness is a big one for me and a lot of my friends.
Now you're talking my language here. That's yeah. No, as a tabletop gamer, I was indoctrinated into it by a group of friends, and they were super into it, but they were not into D&D. When we got into it, it was the late 90s, and D&D just seemed too complicated and also a little musty and old in the late 90s. But we got really into the then very new White Wolf games like Vampire Vampire the Masquerade, Mage, the Ascension. We played a little werewolf. Mostly it was Vampire or Mage for us. And we had a ton of fun with those games. So I totally understand the appeal. I played for like years with the same troop in multiple games like that. But specifically Dungeons and Dragons, I had no experience with.
Yeah, the one thing that I remember about Mage the Ascension anyway was the opening story that explicitly had the guy describing the trench coat that he was wearing and his katana, which if anything says the late 90s, it's that.
You need
Yeah.
description of those up front. I mean, what am I looking at? And I want to say, is this incorrect to say that for the past few years, we've sort of been in like a Dungeons and Dragons renaissance with things like Critical Role and Harming Quest, and now
I think so.
Oh, definitely. Like, hey, those Critical Role guys, if you want to listen to Persona voice actors play D&D, there you go. It's right there.
Do I?
Yeah.
And we're currently recording this in July, as the great Orson Welles refused to say. You guys are in September listening to this, but like now that we're all remote and doing things remotely, I think people are really picking up on like playing Dungeons and Dragons and other role-playing games remotely. There are so many good resources online to do that with, and all you need to do is like do a Skype or a Discord call, and everything you can do is just online waiting for you.
Mm-hmm. Though if you're not in the same room as your DM, sometimes you got to extra trust them that they're rolling their dice for real.
I need a webcam on those dice.
I mean, there are like online apps that you could use where it's like it puts you all in the same server, basically, where you roll the dice and it's just like an app that appears on the table so everyone can see what dice you rolled.
Oh, I should have figured that existed.
Yeah. Things like I'm thinking Roll20, I believe, is the big one that's out there right now. Although I'm pretty sure that there are other programs.
Yeah, and well, like we're in the 5th edition renaissance of it now. I've heard tell in my research that like D&D makes more money now for Hasbro than it ever has. Like it's as big as it ever was. I think too, maybe a thing that helped was Stranger Things. It's about a D&D troop going on adventures.
Yeah, I could see that. And 5th edition, a lot of people say it's the best D&D has ever been. I personally don't disagree with that. I am a complete weirdo whose favorite edition of D&D is 4th edition, which is not a popular opinion, that one.
I see. What makes me feel old is when I was growing up hearing about D&D, all my friends called it like AD&D because they were playing advanced. Like that moniker has gone away a long time ago on D&D.
When I would see, games and books based on D&D, there were always the advanced Dungeons and Dragons. I'm like, wow, that sounds complicated. Advanced. I don't think I'm ready for this.
I mean, technically, the new current edition of D&D is the 5th edition of Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. The basic D&D line has kind of just disappeared, unfortunately.
The closest I came to starting a D&D campaign was like twice one friend wanted to be a dungeon master or storyteller, my preferred naming, but he was going to be the dungeon master, and the real pain of it for him was like you have to convince your friends to let you be in charge of imagination time, and that's why our DM was usually the most charismatic leader boy of the group. But this other guy tried to I could do a DM thing too, and we'd all make our characters. Like this happened twice. We made our characters, and then for us as beginners and him not really knowing D&D too well either, after 2 hours of it, we were all just like, I don't want to play this game. I am so bored of how long it took me to make this character.
Yeah, that's unfortunately a problem, especially with 3rd edition going onward, where a lot of people compare making a D&D character with doing your taxes.
Yes.
Which is not entirely the same thing because there is a bit of creativity involved in there, but yeah.
Yeah, meanwhile in Vampire, I'm like, and I could get done with a character in like 15 minutes. Like name, 3 points there, 4 points there, X and willpower, all the easy things.
I unfortunately am a bit younger than you, Henry, in that the World of Darkness that I'm familiar with is the new World of Darkness, or as it's called nowadays, Chronicles of Darkness. So yeah, but it is a lot simpler to make a World of Darkness character than a D&D character, I tend to find.
Yeah, actually, you're reminding me why I stopped playing that too. Well, also that I moved away and I just didn't want to find a new troop in California. But it was like they had a campaign that was the end of the world for Old White Wolf and then that was their excuse for like, I guess really it was third edition though, or it was definitely the third edition of the rules, but like the second version of it. But that was my drop off when they rebooted everything.
But now it's back. Old World of Darkness is back.
It's back in POG form yet, or?
No, they're just releasing, like, they brought back Vampire the Masquerade and all of the, like, new Old World of Darkness books, not New World of Darkness books, because that's a different thing, Old World of Darkness books, and yeah, they just brought them back into, like, the modern times, so they just say that Gehenna and the Apocalypse and whatever just didn't happen anymore. The Ascension Wars, I think, was the
I
main
think-
one.
This is so
Yeah,
nerdy, sorry.
I was gonna say I think we're alienating all of our jock listeners, which make up a surprising amount of our listenership.
Well, D&D does thankfully have a very jock origin, which I can get into a bit when we go to their history section.
Oh, sure, yeah. Well, and also, I super hunk jock himself, Joe Manganiello, is like the face of D&D playing online right now. He's really pushing himself as like, I'm the celeb who plays D&D. I'm number one.
He has supplanted Vin Diesel.
Yeah. Oh man, I watched him. He did an interview with Stephen Colbert. Oh, also Colbert played a ton of D&D in his youth, not in a long time. But Colbert was like, "Oh, I see you have all these celebrity games you're doing, Joe Manganiello. Isn't that cool? And have you talked to Vin Diesel?" And Joe was like, I know all the Hollywood guys who play role playing games, and they don't ever see Vin Diesel play it. I'm just saying.
The true story is that Vin Diesel has had his frontal lobe replaced with muscle, and he's incapable of playing Dungeons and Dragons now. It's very sad, but what a smooth head he's got.
Oh.
But this cartoon that is based upon Dungeons and Dragons does have an interesting history on its own too. My exposure to this animated series was kind of similar to Devin's in that in like 1990, I checked this, like 90 or 91, Fox Kids got the rights to air it during their block. They only did it for like a season, but
I somehow missed
yeah.
this entirely. Like, I never saw this on broadcast or cable TV. It was always like a YouTube video or like something at Anime Night or whatever.
When I watched it in like 91, 92, I could definitely see how it was like ahead of the curve in 83, and you compare it to most 83 cartoons, it's way better. But by that time, in a post-Batman the Animated Series world, it seemed less impressive to me as a kid, so I didn't super get into it. But I really like the look of it, and now when I watch it, I'm like, oh, I appreciate it for honestly the anime-ness of it. And also there's some pretty good writing in the show for, again, a 1983 kids cartoon.
I think that this, like, honestly, the reason why I wanted to do this cartoon is because I think that this cartoon deserves a remake or like some kind of new adaptation for a modern audience, because I think that there's a lot of potential with this cartoon if you just tweaked it slightly in like the right direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The movie didn't quite do it for you.
No. I haven't seen that movie actually, nor have I seen the made-for-TV sequel that premiered on the Sci-Fi channel.
Oh, good old Sci-Fi. But okay, yeah. Why do we go a little into the history of Dungeons and Dragons, the game itself, before the series began? I suppose it all begins with Gary Gygax and his friends, right?
Not exactly. Okay, so where it really begins, kind of, is with a guy named Dave Arneson, and he belonged to the Castle and Crusade Society, which was just a wargaming bunch. They played medieval war games, and they were a bunch of nerds, and they had this, fictional kingdom that they all sort of ruled over. And Dave Arneson controlled the most northern reaches, which he called Blackmoor, I think.
Yeah.
And he would run what was called Bronstein likes. And Bronstein was an even older game, which was basically took place in a fictional town of Bronstein. And it was just, you controlled individual characters, and a lot of it was very ad-libbed, yada yada. And next to this was Gary Gygax creating his, Chainmail game. And Chainmail was meant to be very realistic. Like the book even says in its first couple chapters, make sure you study up on real medieval combat before you play this game, because it's supposed to be as realistic as possible.
It's like that game For Honor, that Ubisoft game.
I've seen the cover to that chainmail thing. It's a Crusades type battle is happening on it. It definitely is less wizardy than you expect from the creator of Dungeons and Dragons.
And I want to say
Yes.
this goes back like centuries too, to just like ancient war games with like little tin soldiers on a map and stuff like that. Like there are really much older versions of like, let's simulate combat with little characters.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. So the thing about Chainmail is that it had a supplement in the back for, fantasy adventures. Well, not adventures, because fantasy warfare, basically, with like wizard units and dragon units and, flying mounted griffin units and stuff like that. And it was this that Dave Arneson would apply to his ad hoc rules for the Blackmore Bronsteins that he would basically run. Yeah, weird terminology, obviously, but this was like years ago in the early 1970s. Now, eventually, these got fairly popular, and he met Gary Gygax at Gen Con, where he sort of introduced him to like these Blackmore Bronstein sessions that he'd run. And Gygax liked the concept enough that, he and Dave Arneson, who, well, let's be honest here, Dave Arneson is sort of like the iWorks to Gary Gygax's
I
Walt
was just
Disney.
thinking that, yeah. From your description, that sounded very similar.
Yeah. So kind of a fun story there. Basically, Arneson and Gygax wind up making D&D, and Arneson leaves the company. I forget, it's TSR, but I forget what it stands for. Tactical Rules Simulation, something like that.
Yeah, tactical strategic rules, I think it is.
Right, yes. So Gygax and Arneson and a bunch of other people, I forget their names, form TSR, and Arneson winds up leaving, and he leaves for a good while, but I think he comes back somewhere in the late 80s, I can't remember. And yeah, it's pretty much just, the Gygax show for a good number of years before TSR goes under for very, very, very complicated reasons.
Yes.
And that I'll go back to bad management on his part. Well, not just on his part, on a lot of people's parts, but
Well,
yeah, pretty much.
I mean, look, Gary Gygax was like a stoner nerd who liked playing wargaming. It doesn't necessarily mean you can run a company, and same with the other geeks that surrounded him. But yeah, the concept of a role-playing game, like to call it that, was very new for the time. Just the idea of like, you aren't playing chess, you aren't playing these wargaming things where you have your, just your miniature and you pull out a freaking ruler and see like, you're slightly outside of my range. Like, you're not playing yourself, playing the game to your best abilities or the general of an army. You are a person in a world experiencing a story. And it's also like what attracted me always to tabletop role-playing games wasn't, simulating combat. It was the improvisation of playing a character, the acting of it, and the creativity it put on you to be a person in a world. I really enjoyed that part of it. That's why I really like in, Community's version of it, and I've seen it now in some other stuff. Role-playing games, when they show D&D, like they take out the miniatures. Like you definitely can play D&D with miniatures, right? But I like seeing the miniature-less versions that make it all just imagination and dice.
Yeah. I mean, I would argue that D&D maybe isn't at its strongest in that state, but there
Sure.
are a lot of games that aren't D&D that, capitalize on more of the storytelling element, and those games tend to be pretty good.
Yeah, well, again, this is from I am a vampire fan talking about D&D. So that those games, they called the DM the storyteller or the game master. Like they took the dungeon part out of it too. But it also, like Dungeons and Dragons, when it was finally formalized and released as a set in 1974, it also came as like when fantasy stuff was getting more and more popular in U.S. culture in general, like Lord of the Rings, those movies from Ralph Bakshi to come out.
The Black Cauldron, anyone?
The Black Cauldron.
We just recorded that podcast, by the way.
Yeah.
There's a Black Cauldron in this cartoon, too.
There is.
I can't wait for you to talk all about Little Frumpy, or whatever his name is.
Gurgi.
We said no more Gurgi
Gurgi.
chat on this network, and we just violated that rule. We have to shut down immediately.
Oh, no.
But yeah, so after the 74 released, they also worked on a more complex rule system to create advanced Dungeons and Dragons. And I believe that led to like a lawsuit from Gygax and the David guy you were talking about. Who,
Dave Arneson?
Yeah, Arneson, I think, was like, hey, I should get money from these AD&D, and Gygax tried to argue that he had completely changed the game by making it advanced, and so Arneson wasn't due any money, and that led to a lawsuit.
Yeah, there's unfortunately a lot of ugly history with D&D, and even with Gygax in his later years. Not to get too political, obviously, but Gygax was a libertarian, and he said some somewhat controversial things in his later years on certain forum posts, which I won't get into because they're kind of
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
He was a level 20 Randian.
Oh, God. I think we're probably lucky we're not hearing what he has to say about right now. I'm
I
thinking.
don't know. He got along with Al Gore in that episode of Futurama. Oh, wait, no, he didn't get along with him.
Yeah.
Put the dice away before I take them away.
But so as the 1980s began for TSR, business was booming. They're selling a lot of D&D and advanced D&D to adults and kids alike across America, but they were looking to expand. Around the same time, too, Gary Gygax is both getting divorced in real life from his wife and getting kind of shoved to the side in his company because he doesn't have majority ownership of it anymore. And so he kind of spins off into Dungeons and Dragons entertainment arm of TSR, which sees him move to Los Angeles to try to get some movie and television adaptations of Dungeons and Dragons, including, I wonder how much this actually was close to happening, but he said he was going to get a movie made directed by John Borman with Orson Welles in it about Dungeons and Dragons. But what he did successfully do was sell the cartoon rights for an animated series, as well as some toy rights to LJN, the same folks who made WWF toys back then.
Stands for Louis J. Norman.
It does?
It really does.
Wow.
You saying that about him getting Orson Welles for a D&D movie just makes me imagine Maurice LaMarche basically just saying, and then the half-elf paladin swung his sword at the goblin.
We should hire Maurice to do that. If he's got a cameo, we can do that.
I want to hear Orson Welles going off in a sound booth about the pronunciation of barbarian or Tiamat.
Cavalier would not be said that. Yeah. Also, he did Transformers the movie, so I think Orson Welles would have said yes to whatever it was.
He did that to just buy more wine.
That's true. And it was like an afternoon, talk about a toy for an afternoon and you get more wine money. But also another important dynamic of this time of them getting an animated series for Dungeons & Dragons is that a lot of especially conservative folks were not enjoying the existence of Dungeons & Dragons, and it had the new satanic panic for it. It happened to rock music, jazz, comic books. It will happen to video games after it happens to tabletop games, but in the early 80s, Dungeons & Dragons was the new enemy of the mainstream.
Yeah, heavy metal was part of that whole scare too, and very, very, very funny in retrospect. I just feel bad for all the poor kids who had their fun games taken away and were made to be even more of an outsider.
I mean, it's especially funny when you remember that Gygax was also fairly Christian, if I recall correctly.
Yes,
and, a lot of the conflict of D&D comes from, fighting these evil gods, fighting these evil cultists. You're not the demon worshippers who are trying to unleash hell upon earth. That was honestly more of a vampire thing, if anything. You are the brave heroes coming in with your swords and your holy symbols and smiting off these evil demon guys.
Yeah, you're killing all these pagan worshippers of graven images, and with more than a little colonialism to it as well. Which but that's like Tolkien too. So.
Oh, definitely. In fact, if I recall correctly, Wizards of the Coast just recently announced for Dungeons and Dragons that they're going to be removing the quote unquote evil races, so they're just making orcs and goblins no longer always evil.
That's probably a good move.
Yeah, honestly, they should have done that years ago, but better late than never.
We had good, it was 30 years ago in Star Trek, they finally were like, Klingons can be good too. They're not all evil, but it took a little longer for D&D. But yeah, in the early 80s, Christian groups were mad at all these demons and say Babylonian gods like Tiamat or Tiamat. They say Tiamat in here. I always said Tiamat. I don't know. Devin, do you know the pronunciation?
I don't think it necessarily matters because Tiamat, the deity from Babylon, is described as being like a weird fish creature that is associated with salt water, and she flooded the earth. So I don't think the D&D dragon thing is that closely related.
Okay. But though also it wasn't just, Pat Robertson of the world who were mad about it. Even secular moms around the world, parents, were mad at the idea of these alleged stories of D&D causing psychotic breakdowns in players who got too obsessed with it, or even blaming suicides on D&D.
There's a famous Tom Hanks movie,
that Mazes and Monsters. Yes, the first Tom Hanks starring movie, apparently a made-for-TV movie where Tom Hanks plays a guy who is so obsessed with mazes and monsters that he has a psychotic breakdown and seems to think he will forever be in the world of his characters. like, which the assumptions that makes about the players of the game tells you a lot about what parents groups were feeling.
These people were not ready for a world in which people die of malnutrition by playing MMORPGs or just pass away in internet cafes.
Yeah, he was in that phone booth and he cried and he went, I think I killed somebody.
God. Though I think now in retrospect, if you want more realistic versions of what D&D play back in 1983 looked like Stranger Things, the first season is literally set in 1983 and the four main boys are seen playing it at the end. Like they call the main villain of season 1 a Demogorgon because it looks like the monster in their game. Or also Patton Oswalt's first book that was like a collection of autobiographical essays.
Yeah.
He has a really good section on playing D&D in the 80s, like early 80s, and what that meant for him as a teen.
Yeah, it's kind of weird that they called it the Demogorgon, considering the Demogorgon is like some two-headed baboon thing with like tentacles on its arms. Honestly, whenever I see a picture of it, it just makes me think of that Ren and Stimpy episode with the baboon.
The dangerous baboon that kills them for getting the hog faces.
It's the hog gels.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Hog shells.
Yeah. But okay, so that sets the stage for a D&D cartoon, and you would think with all these parents group mad about it that a network would never touch a Dungeons and Dragons cartoon for kids, but the property was that hot, and they were always looking for new Saturday morning cartoons to fill the space. So basing this a lot on the history as it was written by the writer of this episode and all-time like cartoon writing, producing legend, Mark Evanier, as well as an amazing biographer of Jack Kirby. Like, he's a great dude. But Mark Evanier, writer of this episode, as he says, Marvel had been pitching a thing that was a knockoff of D&D in like 1981 called Swords and Sorcery, but that wasn't getting bought. But then 1982, Marvel Productions, which you'll learn all the history of that in our Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends one, but Marvel Productions, they were looking to make things other than just Spider-Man and Hulk cartoons, and they get the rights to do the D&D official show. And so they rework that pitch that was written under the writer Dennis Marks and a ton of other hands touching it. And eventually they're like right up to the deadline of pitching it to CBS. And Mark Evanier says that he was working on another show. He was told, like, please, if you can write this in 48 hours, we'll have this pitch ready. Like, write the show Bible and rework the pilot, and we'll have it ready to pitch to CBS.
And then he received a vision from the future where he said, wait a second, you know what's really popular? Teens going into other worlds. Yeah. It's all the rage in Japan.
This is an isekai. Yeah.
It is an isekai.
You know what? I was just thinking, what could make this more palatable to parents of the 80s that are concerned about this game is like the point of this series is they want to stop playing Dungeons and Dragons. They're like, let's get out of Dungeons and Dragons. It's bad. It's scary. We want to go back to not playing this game.
As Mark tells it too, there were lots of hands all over this. Like the two producers at CBS who wanted this show, they reworked it a ton of times too. Like one big thing they had for the pitch before Mark touched it was like, these can't just be kids who engage in a game and then leave it. They have to be trapped there. So there's constant danger for them. Originally, I think their pitch was like, well, yeah, kids play the game and they stop playing the game at the end of every episode. And like, no. They have to be trapped there. And as Mark said too, the original pitch had way more characters. He said he cut like 2/3 of the cast out of it.
I think there's already too many in this series. I think we could do with 4.
Right? Yeah. But, well, then you don't have as many classes job classes in there.
I'm just thinking of the show Slayers, which is another good RPG style show.
Yeah. But is there a unicorn there to sell to kids, Bob?
No. Little uni.
But actually, instead of me describing the premise of the show, why don't I let Scott Baio describe it to Boss Hogg and Roscoe P. Coltrane in this clip?
Have you got any more to show us?
I certainly do. I got a spine tingling. Oh, ready? Oh. You'll enter into the medieval kingdom of fire-breathing dragons. See, where 6 kids from today's world are caught up in the fantasy realm of Dungeons and Dragons. Ooh. Watch it, if you dare.
What's a chachi? I know a thing or two about being zapped, and these kids just got zapped into a game. Because he was in the movie Zapped, you see.
Oh, that's right. That movie is triple canceled.
Yeah, that man is in jail now, that character.
But yeah, that clip is from the 1983 Saturday Morning Preview, which you guys should just look that up, of CBS Saturday Morning Preview, because it's hosted by Scott Baio, who is just Scott Baio, and he's like, he plays a song in the middle of it. But the characters of Boss Hogg and Roscoe P. Coltrane from the Dukes of Hazzard show are there in character. And they're like, what's the story about these cartoons?
I really miss those, and you can find a lot of these online. Like Larry and Balky are together, like introing all the cartoons and telling you about the next lineup. And I think one of my favorite ones, and I did watch it live and then much later on YouTube, is all the Saved by the Bell kids are like, they get zapped to another world. They're exploring all the new cartoons, including Captain N, which was new.
Oh man, I forgot that reawakened a memory for me. And yeah, the group they brought together, it's a clever exploration of the idea of like how a real life game works, because the show is about a dungeon master giving them orders to go on adventures. Each character is a person with a clear job class that is straight from the books. And also it shows as a way of selling Dungeons and Dragons, it also sells it as a very diverse group of people, like of different age ranges and classes, and 2 girls. There's not one Smurfette on this team. There's 2 Smurfettes.
And one's a thief.
One is a
like all women. No, I'm kidding.
I'm glad the African American girl is not the thief.
I think I thought very hard about that.
Although they do make the only African American girl wear a fur bikini, which don't like that.
Yeah, and she's a super athlete, so a different trope given to those characters. But yeah, well, hey, it's a different time. Also, I mean, the Sheila the Thief, she wears like a mini skirt too.
Yeah,
so.
I was thinking like all I know about D&D really is what Final Fantasy brazenly just stole, because Final Fantasy stole so much of D&D. Just there could have been a lawsuit and there wasn't. So I don't know if all these classes exist in D&D, like Acrobat. I didn't know that was a class in D&D.
It is sort of. Well, okay, it's complicated.
These are the old classes too, right? I mean, these are the 83 classes.
This is okay. So the thing you need to understand is that this cartoon came out when first edition AD&D was basically the only thing that existed. This is before second edition. So the Thief Acrobat is in Unearthed Arcana, and it's just Thief Acrobat. It is a thief who has reached level 5 and has decided to become an acrobat. So it's more like a prestige class than anything.
Okay. But also, too, like the Dungeon Master, he makes his game way too imbalanced. He gives them all like these magic items at the very start of their game. Like that's a poor Dungeon Master, I think. They got to earn that stuff.
Yeah. He's making a novice DM mistake. Give all your players. He's doing what we call a Monty Hall GM.
Oh, like the game show host.
Yeah. Well, the idea of a Monty Hall GM is just, it's a GM who just gives their players everything. You get all the magic weapons, you get all the gold, and you get this palace, and basically you don't have any real problems or issues that you have to tackle. It just gets kind of boring.
Though, yeah, that connection to Japanese role-playing game, the video game versions of them, yeah, it's interesting because like there's D&D, and then Wizardry kind of takes that as an American computer game, and then that gets popular with the super PC gamer nerds in Japan, and then those guys like Yuji Horii, they're like, what if I made a kids version of this called Dragon Quest? And then from there, then Final Fantasy's like, we can make a better version of this. So,
well, I mean, Mark Brown of Game Maker's Toolkit, I think he just released a video on YouTube like maybe a day ago that talked about the split between Western RPGs and Japanese RPGs in video games anyway, and it all kind of goes back to D&D. So it's interesting that Resident Evil would not exist without D&D.
That's true. Yeah, actually, I forget who wrote it at 1UP. Maybe it was Jeremy Parrish, my Retronauts co-creator. There was an article at 1UP saying like D&D is basically every video game now. Like video games as they are now would not exist without D&D, because every game has like a skill tree. A lot of games have classes, experience points, and inventory, things like this. Like all of these things we associate with a role-playing game.
I was just going to say that, yeah, if you think about it, D&D is kind of the origin of a lot of video games, and it's kind of amazing that it's still such a cultural touchstone for a lot of people, even though this cartoon and those movies are really all that we have to show for it, which honestly isn't a lot.
Yeah, it's surprising how little ephemera they've been made for it. I would have thought that when Hasbro got it, they'd start investing in that more, but it takes a long time to make stuff. So
well, that's the problem, I think, is that when TSR had the license, they were the D&D company. company. They were, we make Dungeons and Dragons. But then when they gave it over to Hasbro was like, well, we have Transformers and we have, My Little Pony. Why the hell do we need, to make a TV show or a cartoon about this, board game? I mean, they haven't even made a TV show or a cartoon about Magic the Gathering even, which is way more successful than D&D, unfortunately.
I'm really surprised Hasbro has not done like a USA-opoly variant of D&D, like Minions D&D or like Doctor Who D&D or Big Bang Theory D&D. There are so many ways they could ruin the IP.
Don't give them ideas.
Yeah, don't give them ideas.
So Evanier also, for his writing, he had one complaint about having to make the show that he was forced to put in, which was the character of Eric, the rich snob.
I hate that. I hate him. Voiced by Donnie Most?
Yeah, I'll explain that.
Okay,
one.
I was confused by them. Like, who is this guy?
But so Evanier says that was a network mandate that was from moralistic parents groups who were saying like kids shows don't teach kids enough lessons. And so he said that characters like Eric were there for a pro-social message because the rest of the group always wants to do something. And then Eric says, well, I don't want to do that. And then he is proven wrong for going against the group and not being properly socialized, which Mark was like, I don't like that message. Sometimes the group is wrong. Why are you making the guy who disagrees with the group always the bad guy?
This is a pro-conformity show.
I have two things in response to that, actually. The first isn't this also the era of, the war on drugs? So, you're crossing the wires here. Like, do we go, like, what if the group wants to do drugs? Uh-oh. The second thing is I actually really like Eric in concept because here's the thing. He is a conniving, cowardly, rich boy who he's the least heroic character out of all of them, and he's the paladin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stop and you go, oh.
I do like that about the character of Eric in, maybe you can give that to Evanier that he's like, well, if I have to have one of these characters, let's at least subvert tropes and have the guy who is in the golden armor and bright red cape, who your instant thought as a child seeing the show is like, this is the hero, right? Like, this is the leader of the group. And he's a whiny jerk who's like, I wish my dad was here to buy me things.
He's the opposite of the good Eric, the He-Man Eric, right?
Yeah, you're right.
From the same period.
But instead, the leader of the group is the Ranger, which I guess does fit with, like, in Lord of the Rings, the leader of the Fellowship is technically a Ranger in the group. But so, after writing those first 2 episodes, Evanier left the project. He was too busy to stick around and run the show. And the original story editor on the show was Howard the Duck creator Steve Gerber.
Wow.
He was fresh off of Thundar, and this has a little bit of Thundar DNA in it there, too, with Evanier and Gerber. And Gerber, who is no longer with us, he had a quote from a few years ago in an interview which was about why he worked on G.I. Joe. We talked about his work on G.I. Joe in the No Place Like Springfield episode. But Gerber did this right before G.I. Joe, and he said this about it. The experience with D&D had been so painful just in dealing with CBS that I decided no amount of money was worth it. No matter what, I was not going to work in animation with networks again.
Wow.
And so his next job was story editor on G.I. Joe, a syndicated show, so he didn't have to deal with the network standards and practices. Like, they say, like, Judy Price, who was their executive at CBS, did the best she could, but standards and practices, especially because of the Satanic Panic on D&D, had notes on every single thing they wanted the kids to do in the show.
Yeah, that just seems kind of depressing, honestly, that, I mean, if anything was going to get, parental groups to really hone in on it and try to, put notes on every damn thing, it would probably be Dungeons and Dragons cartoon, especially at the time.
Yeah.
I'm really glad I don't think there are these freakouts anymore. I think we've outlasted all of them in society, these media freakouts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think,
I haven't seen one. I mean, Christian groups will get mad about everything. I mean, they're mad about Harry Potter and Pokemon and all that stuff, but I can't remember anything recently that was just like, ooh, this is the new highway to hell that the kids are driving down.
You're right. I can't remember the last time there was a very popular thing in media that Christians say, like Game of Thrones, that would have been the new Harry Potter that the Christian groups or, cultural conservatives would jump on to say, like, this is doing blank, but I don't really see that.
Yeah, I think entertainment is too fragmented and no one can keep track of who is watching watching what and how popular certain things are. It's not like there are 3 networks and only a certain amount of shows you can see, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Plus, I mean, the biggest things nowadays are like the Marvel movies, which is like those characters have been around for ages. So what are you going to say that now Spider-Man is like corrupting the innocence of youth or whatever?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. And then on top of that, like the things like Transformers are so that they're like just the pure military industrial complex, like the cultural conservatives wouldn't get mad at. I'd say this is somebody who has loved a lot of things that are Transformers, but obviously not Bayformers. So after the first season, Gerber left as the lead writer, story editor on it. And for the remaining episodes, it was Carl Gears, who he'd follow up this by going to Disney and we're working on Goof Troop and Adventures of Winnie. Like he was a story editor on a lot of stuff and still with us. And there's a few more interesting writers on the staff for this one too. We've got a young Paul Dini writing on this. This was his job right before He-Man. There was Saturday morning cartoon machine. Jeffrey Scott wrote 9 episodes.
Go back to our Muppet Babies podcast. He wrote like 40 some of those.
On the making of extras about this that were on the DVDs, even the producer on the show is just like, oh, we gave it to Jeffrey Scott because he just was a machine. Like you could just ask him, write in a week a bunch of scripts for this and he could just do it. But probably the most prominent writer of that group for the second half of the episodes is Michael Reeves, who we talked a lot about in our Batman and Gargoyles podcasts. This was one of his earliest writing gigs. He wrote 7 episodes in the second season. And, well, sorry, technically it's 3 seasons, but it's like 16 episodes that were spread across 2 years because I think Marvel just didn't have the money to make too many episodes of one thing at the same time. I think too it was when they were putting their biggest bet on Muppet Babies, so you're not going to produce 13 Dungeons and Dragons while you're trying to make Muppet Babies in 84.
Even with Muppet Babies, which was a big hit, they were only making like 13 or 18 a year.
Yeah. But so Michael Reeves wrote many of people's favorite episodes of the Dungeons and Dragons show. He did the Dragon's Graveyard, which I watched that episode, and you can see Reeves bouncing up against as far as they could go with the show. But he wrote an episode where the kids decide they are sick of Venger chasing him, and they're gonna just kill him. And it's a really great episode where the Dungeon Master shows up at the start, and he's like, "Well, kids, you need to go here next." Like, hey, no riddles, no nothing. How do we stop Venger permanently? And he's like, oh no, let's not. And they're like, shut up, old man. Tell us what to do.
They want to go back to the world that has a Dungeons and Dragons roller coaster.
They need to build one of those.
Yeah, that was one of the episodes I was thinking of suggesting we do for this. Another one was a really out there episode where Venger basically takes a bunch of historic figures from around our history. Yeah. And one of them is a SS Luftwaffe pilot from Nazi Germany, and he plans to give him a modern Air Force plane, and so that he can win World War II.
Yes, that's right. Venger in one episode is going to help Nazis win World War II.
Wow.
Yes. You can put Nazis in cartoons in the 80s as bad guys, not as good guys, but still, it's always weird to see that stuff in old kids' cartoons.
I was going to suggest we do that episode, but then I decided against it because it's actually kind of boring.
No, this was, it's good to start with the first one, and this ep is, it really sums up the show pretty well. Mark Evan here talked about he wrote the pilot just to be like, here, look, this is the machine of an episode. Like, this really is what a pilot's supposed to be. The kids are told to go someplace, and then they have an adventure and learn lessons. Like, that's all there is to it. Also, another high-level producer on the show is Hank Surian, who was another Hanna-Barbera vet who went over to Marvel Productions. He helped develop and run the show as a producer. Also is casting director and voice director of the show. And he had some funny stories about the somewhat star-studded cast of the group. So there's 3 sitcom stars in the lead on this show. You have Hank and Presto. They're voiced by Willie Ames and Adam Rich, who were the co-stars on 8 is Enough.
Oh, I know Willie Ames from Charles in Charge and then later Bible Man.
That's true. He was also Bible Man and Buddy on Charles in Charge, yes. And Willie Ames was like, if you wonder why parents had gave their kids like bowl cuts in the 80s, it was because of Adam Rich's character on 8 is Enough had that exact haircut.
So Willie and Adam are from 8 is Enough?
Yes,
Was
yeah.
8 is Enough the
It's a Dick Van Patten show.
I confused that one with Too Close for Comfort. They're like
Yes.
the same in my brain show because they were never really rerun that much, so I didn't really watch them. But Too Close for Comfort is the one with the cartoonist dad.
Yes, and they're all Catholic. There's more Catholic jokes in that show.
8 is Enough, okay.
Yeah, which apparently was based on like a CIA guy too, who
Okay.
had 8 kids. But anyway, but so those are the two folks from 8 is Enough. Then you have Eric the Cavalier, voiced by Happy Days Don Most. He's Don Most in the credits, not
Donnie Most.
Yeah.
Raise a glass and toast to Happy Days, Donnie Most. We are in the 1983, like we are still in the Happy Days-averse, where like 9 spin-offs are exploding out of this show that probably just ended around 83, I think.
I think so. Well, Hank Sarian had a funny story about that. Was why he wanted Donnie Most was that he had just at Hanna-Barbera produced the Fonz cartoon, and he was like, Most was the only good voice actor on that, so I wanted to keep working.
That's
with
because
him.
he did not have a career after Happy Days.
He actually was like,
Has the Fonz gone to space yet?
I do believe the Fonz and Josie and the Pussycat Space shows have happened by this point,
But
yeah.
not the Army. That was Laverne and Shirley.
Yes, yeah. All those shows, like this kind of show, Dungeons & Dragons, it also premiered next to The Dukes, a Dukes of Hazzard show that was all like just turning popular sitcoms into cartoons was the style at the time. You don't do that anymore, really. There should be a Big Bang Kids. Do that show.
That's Young Sheldon.
Oh, you're right.
In a way, he is a cartoon.
And the rest of the cast is a mix of lifers in the voice acting world or a couple of like people who this is their only credit. Like Diana the Acrobat is voiced by Tanya Gale Smith, and don't really know much more about her. This is their only IMDb credit. Bobby the Barbarian is voiced by Ted Field III, son of the executive at CBS who worked on this show.
How do you get that job?
You know, in the extras, Ted Field is like, he applied without my knowing of it, and it was an entirely blind process. I was like, yeah, sure.
I worked for everything I've gotten. It's not my dad.
Well, this was his, Ted Field did this, and then he was like a sidekick in the Mr. T Kids cartoon in 84, and that was his last job. Ted Field, according to his dad in the making of thing, he's like, he's a successful dentist now.
Aw.
So, and then we've got, Sheila the Thief, voiced by Katie Lee, who she's a voice in a ton of stuff. She was Sunny Gummy in the Gummy Bears and Honker.
She's Rolf in Muppet Babies.
And Rolf
yeah.
in Muppet Babies.
Yep,
yeah. And also you got Frank Welker, Peter Cullen, and Sidney Miller filling out most of the rest of the roles.
There are lots of Frank Welker noises. Like in the 80s,
yeah.
you needed a Frank Welker mascot that went.
Drives me drives me crazy hearing his voice.
I can handle it with Slimer, but not so much this Gleep Glop.
That Frank Welker, he's one of a kind, and there's going to be a problem in the industry when he retires. Like, it's like, wait, well, we need Frank Welker noises.
You have like 1,000 Welker holes to fill.
Actually, is this the first time you guys are talking about Peter Cullen?
Oh no, I think he's come up before.
Very lightly, maybe.
I know on a
but,
Retronauts, we did a Retronauts about all the voices of Mario, and we played a clip and talked about Cullen on that one because he was Mario in Saturday Supercade.
This was Cullen right before he got hired for Optimus Prime, the role of his career. Yeah.
I see.
The voice director on the show, but he was a fan of Cullen, and he's like, oh, I need a booming voice. And he also joked about how he'd have to schedule Cullen to come in at the end of the day because his character just has to scream all the time, and it was very tiring for him.
With the voice modulation on Venger in this cartoon, he kind of does sound like an evil Optimus Prime.
Oh, yeah, he does. Yeah, you're right. It feels like it's the same technology changing up his voice as they did for Optimus Prime. And another animator on this I really want to talk about is the art director on the show, which he also is on Muppet Babies. Takashi is all it is in the credits.
Oh yeah, I saw the big Takashi credit. He's just like Cher.
I don't know his background too well, but he had come from Hanna-Barbera as one of their top artists and like character designers. His full name, Takashi Masunaga, and he was actually coming to this at Marvel Productions straight off of a really interesting film called Metamorphoses that he did at Sanrio. Sanrio, when they were getting started with Hello Kitty Bucks, they're like, what if we made cartoon films too? And so they made a couple like really weird ones, including what Takashi directed, Metamorphoses, which just took a bunch of like Ovid myths, 6 of them, and made them as silent cartoons.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a very daring cartoon. He directed that, and after that he's like, you know what, I'm just going back to Marvel and I'll just draw characters for you guys. So Takashi really defined the look of this show, and he did the same on Muppet Babies and some other Marvel shows. And then mostly his credits on IMDb, unless, again, those could be all wrong. He worked on a lot of those like 80s knockoffs, direct-to-video Disney things. If you see like, oh, there's an Aladdin. Wait, that looks weird, that Aladdin. Those were the things that he worked on. And also another animators and boarders credited on this are some Talking Simpsons favorites of Kent Butterworth and Milton Gray. They both worked on this.
The first season Simpsons guys who didn't quite make the cut.
And in the overseas animation done by Toei, who did most of the best looking Marvel production stuff, though they also outsourced to a slightly cheaper studio, Nakamura Productions, which I had not looked into them before. They're also based in Japan, and Nakamura worked on tons of stuff. I could see them connected to both Gargoyles episodes we did. They did subcontract work for that. The DuckTales episode we did, Back to the Klondike, they worked on that.
That's a beautiful episode.
They subcontracted on the Yakko's World one, on Animatrix and Akira, and even the Mushroom Samba episode of Cowboy Bebop. They worked on that too.
Wow, cool.
So yeah, Nakamura Pro is a very impressive resume there. So the show debuted September 1983. It aired against Pac-Man and Rubik's World, and it beat it in the ratings. And it was part of the CBS lineup that also included Saturday Supercade.
Wow.
Which, it was like Saturday Supercade goes right into Dungeons and Dragons.
If you were a nerd in 83, this is where you got to be Saturday morning.
And the show would continue for a couple more seasons where it also would air alongside Muppet Babies. And I think Muppet Babies might be partially why the show ended. The stories I read were numerous about it. On the official making of doc, they're like, well, the ratings went lower and Marvel Productions wanted to invest in a new show. So that's what happened. And then CBS didn't want to continue it. Michael Reeves, who wrote a proposed finale for the show that had a fully completed and accepted script in 1985, but wouldn't be produced. Michael Reeves says that it was a mix of ratings, but also by the 3rd season, Gary Gygax had to leave Los Angeles and move back to the East Coast to try to deal with the internal strife at TSR, as TSR was also losing a bunch of money. So that complicated things as well. Like TSR, apparently, Gygax couldn't push for things to keep going. And then plus on top of that, for Marvel Productions, Muppet Babies was so huge, I could see them going like we did 27 episodes of Dungeons and Dragons. Let's move on. Let's work on something else.
Those poor kids will never get home.
They never ever will. Yeah, as the internet began, I did find out starting in the late 90s, I think it became a popular internet bullshit of saying like there was an unproduced last episode where all the kids die and that's why it got canceled.
I think I heard that rumor because my earliest internet experiences were just like going online and looking at all the sites like the cool Gen Xers made. Like, remember this cartoon that was fucked up? And that's how I discovered this cartoon was those, the Sean babies of the world were writing about like their youth that I didn't experience because I was like 5 years too young.
They all got into an accident and the entire series was just a dream that each and every one of them was having individually.
I've never heard that theory before.
It's not a theory. It's just something that everyone says about every dark theory.
No, it's a dream that Homer Simpson had before he died in 2011.
I hate all those fan theories there. But yes, I think it got like in 97, Mark Evanier wrote that essay that I was using as a source because at the end he's like, why do I write this? Well, because I've heard people say that there was a last episode of it and even asking me to send them tapes of this secret last episode. And I am telling you guys, this last episode does not exist. I know, I wrote on the show.
Also, people should know better. In 1985, there were no last episodes of things. There was no finality. At best, they would just kind of wink at you and you'd feel like, oh, this is probably the last one, right? But they would not be like, this is it, the end, close curtain.
Yeah, because a last episode is harder to syndicate. It needs to be able to be rerun forever. Like, also in the early 2000s, Michael Reeves, he revealed online to silence the people saying that there was a real last episode. He's like, look, I did write a final script, and here I can even prove you I published it myself in 1985, so this is not me writing a new script now. And he released a PDF of it online in the early 2000s, like, here's the final episode that we never made called Requiem. And the episode does kind of tie up loose ends, but as Reeves said, they had to leave an opening for a 4th season just in case. And basically it ends on a cliffhanger where you find out Venger is, spoilers, Dungeon Master's son.
Okay.
And that's why Dungeon Master and Venger kind of have this like tete-a-tete thing instead of like trying to kill each other. And
They need counseling is what I think.
and
Dungeon Master fucks.
Oh, man.
And the kids save Venger too. He turns good, and they're like, "Oh, I was turned by the Nameless One." So they name a new big bad, and the episode ends in the script with Dungeon Master opening up a portal, and he's like, "All right, you kids could go home now if you want, but there's more adventures we could have too. It's up to you." And then the camera pulls back, and you don't know what they chose. And I think if that episode had aired, it would actually have only pissed off the kids of the 80s even more because they had an unresolved cliffhanger like that.
That's true. I totally agree with you there.
And that version of the script, Requiem, would end up being made into a full radio play that was put on the 2006 DVD box set of it. So
And I believe they actually got Katie Leigh back to voice the thief girl. I forget her name.
Yeah, Sheila. They did get her. Unfortunately, they couldn't get everybody back together. What's Donnie Most doing? Come on.
I feel like he's got a dealership somewhere.
The show never got any direct toys either, almost certainly because the show's deal was separate from the LJN Toys deal. LJN made up their own toy characters, though occasionally those made up characters did get to appear in the Marvel production show, but they didn't make toys of them, of any of the characters from the animated series. And so the show ends 85. Then in the early 90s, it got reruns on the Saturday mornings of NBC and Fox Kids. And it would kind of air in different reruns packages on cable networks as well, like USA Cartoon Express. So it never really went away. And the Fox Kids channel, because Marvel Productions got bought by Saban, and then it got to air on there. And then in 2006, in the heyday of having good special features and quality DVD box sets,
I miss it.
They made a pretty good collection of it with a ton of extras, commentaries, interviews with people. They really worked hard on it. That is an insanely out of print DVD now. If you want that version, like, you can get some European versions that have some of the extras, but not all. But if you want that original version, people on eBay or Amazon expect you to pay hundreds of dollars for it.
I actually knew a guy in high school who had that version. I don't know where he is now, and if he knows that it's that expensive, I don't know.
He might have been killed for it. You should try to contact him.
Nah, that guy was a douche.
Though apparently those European versions of the DVDs, they have some of the aired music that they weren't able to retain from the second season. Like, though from listening to this episode and the Dragon's Graveyard episode, it sounds like they're just pulling from the same music library as the Amazing Spider-Man show. Like, it's all just the same needle drum music. And so these days, Dungeons & Dragons is more popular than ever, like we talked about, 5th edition, all the successful streamers and podcasters. It's a giant deal. Though this particular version of Dungeons & Dragons with these characters, there's not been much talk of a reboot or returning to it lately. That big DVD release was kind of its last gasp as a series. Though, you know, in some official D&D books or whatever, comics, I have seen there's occasional, like, winks to these characters and seeing them.
Yeah, I'm sure there are like campaigns with Uni popping up somewhere.
I mean, that DVD box set that you talked about actually contained like stats for all of them, and as well as stats for Venture, but I believe they used a 3rd edition's rule set. So, yeah.
They should have recalled that set.
And I think partially the reason you might never see more of this or even another like official release of it, at least in the United States, is because this is a split ownership production. TSR got bought by Wizards of the Coast, which got bought by Hasbro. So Hasbro owns the Dungeons & Dragons idea. This show and the characters in it and the actual produced animation, that's owned by Marvel Productions, which got bought by Saban, which then got bought by Disney.
God.
And so now you have Disney and Hasbro. They are very separate companies that are not that into helping one another. And so
I have to assume Disney will own Hasbro someday. They have to.
I mean, eventually, sure, yeah. So maybe they'll come back then.
That's kind of depressing interesting because, again, like, I think that this cartoon has a lot of potential if you were to make it into, like, a more modern, She-Ra style Netflix, or not necessarily Netflix, just like any kind of, like, modern cartoon where you could give it more of like a story and a plot and have characters develop. Like, again, I said Eric being, the guy that he is, and as well as the paladin, means that there's a lot of potential there, I feel, for, like, give him like a big heroic moments where he, sacrifices himself to save his friends or something cool like that.
I think at the very least for a animated series for Dungeons and Dragons, a new idea could start with this kind of concept of kids being trapped in the world. Like, even if Hasbro's like, well, we can't make it with those specific characters because we don't own them. I think at the very least reworking that concept into a new story could totally work. I feel more attachment to them as kids from the real world who are constantly like, I miss having like peanut butter and banana sandwiches.
I miss my mountain cabin.
I'm more interested in them than if they are, like just inhabitants of the world of D&D.
Mm-hmm. And, I will say, like, again, to go back to this being an isekai, I like that these characters, that these kids want to go back to their world and that they actually, like, miss home. Because, so many isekai anime nowadays are just like, yeah, cool, I'm trapped in this other world. Hooray for me. Let's all go get a harem.
It is like, the real world sucks. Why would I want to go back? Like, that's a sadder message than a show of like, but I miss my mom and dad and all these things.
Which means that Captain N is really the true isekai of this particular genre.
Oh, yeah.
Well, his mom wanted him to clean up his room, so goodbye forever.
See you later. Yeah, talk about OP characters with that guy, but
he had every magic item. He could pause the damn game.
But yes, unfortunately, I think this means that the kids will never get off of that roller coaster and they'll be trapped forever.
In a way, life is like that, isn't it?
It's like a roller coaster. You go up and down, as Baby Kermit would say.
All right.
Another classic Marvel production.
Speaking of the war on drugs.
Yeah. These kids should have been there for that. They should have told you not to do drugs or else you'll go crazy in the Dungeons and Dragons world.
It's true. They should have been standing at the entrance saying, "Don't do it, Michael."
But okay, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we are going to talk about the episode, The Night of No Tomorrow.
Dungeons and Dragons will return after these messages.
Get ready for Superstar Saturday on CBS with the exciting world of Dungeons and Dragons. Then, Bo and Luke are back.
I got a right stinking surprise of cooking for them Pirsky Dukes.
But the Dukes are ready for it. Dungeons and Dragons and the Dukes premieres Saturday, September 17th.
Lightning bolt, and welcome to the break. It's me, Henry Gilbert, one of your hosts.
Hey, it's Bob Mackey. I just rolled a D20, and it came up a critical hit for fun.
And a big thank you for all you guys listening to this week's podcast, and an even bigger thank you to Devin, our guest on this episode, who was a premium patron and chose this one. And you don't have to be a premium patron like Devin, but I must say you do have to be a patron to patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons. I don't make the rules, okay?
It's true, and if you sign up at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons, for $5 a month, you get all these episodes 1 week ahead of time and ad-free, and also access to everything behind the $5 paywall. That is everything we've been doing on the behind the paywall for almost 3.5 years. You get that everything upfront immediately, over 100 bonus podcasts. That includes all of our limited miniseries. To date, those have been Talking Critic, Talking Futurama Seasons 1 and Season 2 Part 1, Talking of the Hill, and coming very soon in late October of this year, Talking Futurama Season 2 Part 2. We're going to be wrapping up the rest rest of Talking Futurama Season 2 using the Talking Simpsons style. That's only available on the Patreon at the $5 level at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons. And also, we have so many other things going on behind the paywall. There's interviews, there's end-of-season wrap-ups and deleted scene specials for Talking Simpsons. Too much to list here, but just we've been doing so much for the Patreon over the past 3+ years. And if you sign up at the $10 level, you get all of the $5 stuff plus one mega-long podcast once a month just for patrons of that level or higher. And what is that, Henry?
You're talking about the What a Cartoon movie podcast. You like this podcast but wish we talked about an animated feature film for twice as long? That exists, and that is our What a Cartoon movie podcast, the premium podcast on patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons. If you sign up right now, you'll be able to hear September's right now before you listen to next week's free version of it that just gives you a preview of it. Our What a Cartoon movie for Return of Jafar, the direct-to-video sequel that set the tone for 2 decades worth of them from Disney. And if you sign up now, you get almost 2 years worth of a back catalog of What a Cartoon movies, over 100 hours of podcasts covering things as varied as Akira to The Black Cauldron and Space Jam. Especially, if you liked all this sword and sorcery talk here, I bet you'd really like our one for The Black Cauldron. Mm-hmm. So please sign up at the $10 level or up your $5 pledge to $10 to get everything that we're doing really cool at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons.
And if you've never signed up for Patreon before, it is so easy to do. And once you do sign up at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons, you're given a code that you have access to at all times. You just drop that code into whatever you use to listen to podcasts, and that way you can integrate our bonus podcast alongside your free podcast you listen to every day. And Patreon also has an app for any smart device. You can download that, and it's very easy to access our bonus content that way. But either way, it is so easy to access all the bonus podcasts you can get by signing up for $5 a month or higher at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons.
So please check all those out today. And now let's grab our monster manuals and head into Dungeons and Dragons.
And now, back to Dungeons and Dragons.
Hey, look! A Dungeons and Dragons ride! Wow, neat!
Give me a break.
I don't like this!
Whoa! What's happening?
Whoa! Where are we?
Look out!
Fear not, Ranger. Barbarian, magician, thief, cavalier, and acrobat.
Who was that?
That was Venger, the force of evil. I am Dungeon Master, your guide in the realm of Dungeons and Dragons.
All right, this episode begins straight off with the opening of the show. No cold open or anything. And it's, a really well animated opening. It doesn't have a song, really. It's a whole lot of exposition, but the way the roller coaster begins to get scary and the way it explodes and the kids fly off of it, that always looks so cool to me.
I kind of wanted a reason for this transportation. Was Venger, did he want these kids for some reason? It's just the roller coaster broke.
I always assumed it was the Dungeon Master brought them there, I think.
That makes more sense to me.
Though also I could see an eventual ending being was it all a dream? That's what the ending I would assume it would be, is they get off of the roller coaster and then they're not sure if they dreamed it all or not. And then the Dungeon Master is a janitor at the amusement park going maybe, wink.
See, don't take edibles and go to Disneyland. It's a bad idea.
So yeah, they all arrive there and they are instantly faced with the 5-headed dragon Tiamat, which that's a real thing from the game. They're given real classes from the game, but Venger is made up. But having the Dungeon Master be this kind of magical imp who also tells them where to go in the story, that's a good way of making the Dungeon Master even a character within the universe of the show.
And he can disappear at will, just like the real Dungeon Master.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, although though, don't do that in an actual game of D&D because the players will try to kill him.
Oh,
They
yeah.
will try to kill him at every single opportunity.
There's always at least one person in the group who, actually, I will say the character of Eric is accurate in the way I've played some D&D or role-playing campaigns, because there's one guy who's like, why should we go to the obvious next step? You know what? I shoot him in the face. And you're like, no, please don't do that. Please don't. And he's like,
You know what? You're right. Eric is that guy.
yeah. I mean, I also had one of those guys who would just be like, if you told him you couldn't do something and you'd beat him in a willpower roll, he's like, fine, then I'm going the other side of town and I'm just going to like jerk off. How about that? Here, I roll to jerk off.
Oh,
And we're
God.
like, really? Okay.
Critical hit. You're drained of protein. I'm sorry.
But yes, they name all of their roles. I read a trivia thing that says they never call Sheila a thief anywhere but in the opening. Like they call the other characters by their classes, but not him.
Her thief powers don't seem to play into any of this at all. I haven't watched many other episodes, so I'm not sure if that comes in handy, but yeah.
Well, I mean, this was the 80s, and, we don't want to give kids the wrong message about what you should be doing.
I say
That's
don't make
true.
one of your characters a thief.
Yeah, there's lots of other classes. Like, in knowing that Mark Evanier is a huge Jack Kirby fan, she also has the feel of original Invisible Girl, who her powers were like, I become invisible and run away from things. Like,
Honestly, 3rd edition made the right choice in just calling it a rogue.
oh yeah,
Oh,
Rogue's
yeah.
way cooler.
I guess she does become invisible in this beginning section. I just completely forgot about it.
Yeah, they just hand her the cloak of invisibility that Harry Potter stole, pretty much. Again, very OP weapon. Same with like a laser bow and arrow, like that never runs out. Again, super OP. And a shield that can block literally anything, even the fire breath of Tiamat, the goddess of chaos.
Yeah, what level are these guys anyways? Can they be holding all these things?
I don't got a clue. I mean, this is 1st edition rules that we're going with here, so yeah, they could. I'm betting that they're somewhere in the realm of level 15 at the very least.
It reminds me of the Legend of Zelda cartoon, which is okay. It's on this level, I think. And the thing is, like, Link's arrows are like light arrows, so he can actually hit things with them, which is cool. So
yeah.
same thing in this one.
That is cool.
Yeah.
2 hits. One more and you're toast, Ganon.
I just know that whenever anyone else tries to use a weapon, it's always like taken away from them, or like in this opening scene, the barbarian is going to club something, or the barbarian's going to club the dragon. It's like, no, we can't actually use weapons in this cartoon, please.
Yeah, Bobby the Barbarian, he gets to smash his club into like the ground and other rocks it's always about the indirectness of it. Like, I hit a thing to bump into you.
I'm innocent. He's a real scrappy dude in this cartoon, I have to say. Like, let me at him.
Yeah, it's the Ninja Turtles principle. Leonardo can't actually cut up any, gangsters, but he can, cut this curtain that causes the weight to fall on top of the gangster that bonks him on the head.
Again, there are so many chandeliers in that world, just to swing off of, to cut down,
and sandbags holding up curtains too.
Oh yeah.
Fortunately, there's always a fjord or a sandbag somewhere. But the opening has such like Toei great A-level animation they do for an OP, like especially the fire breathing effect that comes right before the title screen. That's great. Just the fire effect is really good. And yeah, I think, too, after we did the Black Cauldron, where one of my biggest complaints was you don't see them walk anywhere and they don't work as a troupe of characters. I liked that this started with all seven if you count Uni, all of them just walking somewhere. Like, that's what it is. It's about walking places and talking while you do it. But I do think having the first episode start with all the kids hanging out and then you hear Uni's voice like screaming, it's like that. I feel like that's an instant turn off to new viewers. But yes, in our first clip here, why don't we meet the characters?
Keep going. From up here, we may be able to see which way to go to get home.
Come on, Uni. Wow! What a view! What a view!
What an echo! What an echo! What an echo!
Let me try. Hello? 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 Hello?
Sheila, can't you do something about your little brother?
He's not bothering anyone.
He's bothering me. I'm trying to think of a way to get us out of this freaky place and back home.
If there is a way home.
Don't worry. There is, and we'll find it. I hope.
Come on, Uni. You try.
Oh, that noise.
I mean, couldn't they have just gotten like horse noises and just had him be like an actual unicorn?
They really loved the Frank Welker sounds.
Yeah, it's Slimer adjacent, the sound.
Yeah. And I mean, also, Uni the Unicorn feels so network mandated, especially because in this episode, twice they just like go, oh, Uni, you can't come with us here. We have to go to this place.
Yeah, just fend for yourself.
Though in the Dragon's Graveyard one, they actually use Uni pretty well because Uni almost dies, and that leads even Bobby, the youngest boy, to be like, yeah, we got to kill him. Kill Venture.
You know, it just occurred to me right now as we talk about this, but assuming that they ever did get home, they would have to leave Uni behind, right?
Yeah, no, you're right. He can't come to the real world. That would be dangerous.
I say bring him and then sell him to the government.
I'll be rich forever. Eric would definitely suggest that. Yeah. Also, Eric does have the feel of another thing I've felt in role-playing troops of if you bring a little brother into it or a younger sibling, he goes like, this kid can't play. He's too annoying.
I like that he was implying that somebody kill him. Like, can you do something with him? You know what I mean? Draws a finger across his throat.
God.
It does kind of shove Sheila into the maternal role, but I do like that there's at least the established relationship of like brother and sister between them. It gives you more to pull from instead of just like these were 6 random kids who hung out with each other and rode a roller coaster together one day. And so Uni screaming then summons Tiamat, which my headcanon is, and I think some episodes maybe point towards this being real, is like Tiamat is not like some stupid animal. Like it knows more than it's letting on, and it's kind of playing a role itself in this game here.
I mean, according to the first edition Monster Manual, its intelligence is genius.
Oh, well, all right then. Yeah, definitely then Tiamat is like, when it acts so easily fooled by Sheila turning invisible to trick it into going into the cave, I gotta think that she's just playing along with them then. Yes. And I really like that Tiamat is this, well, I mean, she's lawful evil in the world, which actually I guess I should ask you, Devin, would you guess at the alignments of the characters in this show?
Alignment is such a weird mechanic to me personally. It is like, I can't think of a mechanic for a tabletop game that causes more problems than it solves as alignment does. Mm-hmm. So my take on it is just that, no, they're all pretty much neutral or neutral good at the very best, except for Eric, who I'm going to take as being chaotic neutral. Yeah, that's what I would say.
I agree with you.
But Tiamat, she's also really cool in that she's this indestructible obstacle for the kids. Like, they can never do anything to her. She kind of actually reminds me of, Nemesis in Resident Evil.
Oh, yeah, she's, blasting through walls.
Right? And you never know when she's going to show up to, disrupt the story, and they can't do anything about it. Like, crap, it's the indestructible thing.
There's always a trapdoor, though, right?
It's kind of weird that they have Tiamat in this cartoon, even, because Bahamut is nowhere in this cartoon as far as I know, and he's like Tiamat's, mortal nemesis. The two of them are just constantly in war with one another, so...
Again, I know all these from Final Fantasy.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, and so as they have a little fight with Tiamat, mainly of just trying to distract it and get away from it, and this was when it hit me this show has a Hank and a Bobby, just like King of the Hill, and just like us, me and you, Bob.
We are the next generation of King of the Hill.
After they deal with Tiamat, the Dungeon Master appears with very Looney Tunes kind of impish vibes of what? I was just over there in this next clip.
Bobby, you can't just go charging off like that. Aw, sis, I could have handled her.
Sheesh, I don't blame Vinger for being scared of that dragon.
Nice maneuver, pupil.
Dungeon Master.
Where did you come from? Oh, someplace between there and here.
Listen, I've had it with your riddles. Now give us a straight answer for once. How do we get out of this world?
Patience, Cavalier. All things have a purpose, including your presence here.
Yeah, but that music is definitely needle drop. You can hear like the warped record or like the warped tape or whatever that's being played back. It's definitely much older music.
And also, I like that Eric is just this. He's right to be mad at the Dungeon Master. Like, could you just directly tell me how to get home? But by now, he should know the Dungeon Master is going to be an indirect person.
We are all minors, old man.
Also, we just did our Sonic episode for Sonic Saturday Morning, and hearing Presto in this, like, he sounds just like Jaleel White's Sonic. It's
with his
so
like
similar.
stuffed up voice,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
And so the Dungeon Master then explains to them what their next path is going to be. They're heading to Helix to discover perhaps a way to get home. And we get to see a little splash of Venger here too, which Takashi, as art director in the design for Venger, he really loved being able to add asymmetry to him because it made him much more interesting. And producer gave him notes of like, but that's going to be more expensive to animate. You can't flip the image.
Yeah.
You got to do that. But they apparently were like, Takashi convinced them that Venger will appear so lightly in the show, like not be on screen too much, that they can get away with him having an asymmetrical design. And it makes it much more memorable. But yes, the Dungeon Master explains things, as Dungeon Masters often do.
Helix was once at the mercy of flying dragons who attacked at night, but good magic drove them away. Now, on your way, you must fear only the many faces of evil, all known as Venger. You shall know his newest face by his white hair. Beware, young adventurers.
Wait, Dungeon Master, you can't just leave us.
Huh?
He's gone!
Wow!
I hate it when he does that.
I think it's neat. I'm worried. Sheila, you're always worried. It's simple. The man said go north. We should go north.
Diana's right. It's the only clue we have to a way home. We have to try it.
You know what? I was watching this with a fan on. I guess I didn't hear all the
Oh yeah,
in the background, like all the uni noises. Just like it's a wall of sound.
It's quite a lot of lip flapping from Uni in these clips. Yeah.
Can I just say that that the interaction Sheila has with Diana is a bit odd to me, because it's like it seems like they're postulating on a riddle that doesn't exist.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
He said we should go north. We should go north. Like they, it's a
Wait
funny...
a minute. North means north.
It's a funny drawing of the two of them like going like aha and pointing at each other. I like that art, but yeah, you're right. They're not really discovering something. They're just deciding to follow direction.
Also, do they have a compass?
Oh yeah, that's true.
Maybe Uni's got like iron in its horn or something, and they point it north or whatever. Who knows? I'm making it all up.
At the very least, Presto should, or one of the characters, maybe Hank the Ranger, he should go like, well, the sun rose that way, so that's how we know which way is north, perhaps. Though then again, that rule wouldn't really, just because that's true on the planet Earth doesn't mean that where they live that it rises in the east.
True.
Yeah.
Doesn't the setting have like two suns? What is this setting?
Yeah. I love the design of the backgrounds. Like, yeah, two suns, and then when it's nighttime, there's 3 moons you see later. It's
what's going on with the tides is what I want to know.
The D&D setting Eberron has 13 moons.
My-
That 13th one is a secret.
Whoa, a secret moon. Man. Oh, yeah, they even go to the moon. That's another Final Fantasy moment. That Dragon's Graveyard episode, they go to the moon just like in FF4.
No way.
Yeah.
That rules.
They discover a secret dragon there, too. And so, as the kids are walking, they're bemoaning that they don't have the creature comforts. Like Eric wishes he had his dad's limousine. Bobby wishes he had a peanut butter and banana sandwich. Like
those were your healthy snacks in 1983. Yeah, I'm sure one of the commercials for this was one of those things like, have a big block of cheese, kids.
God, yeah.
Like, I'm gonna sit down and just carve it in like an 800-calorie block of cheese to eat during cartoons.
Yeah.
It's good for you. It's cheese.
140 slices of American cheese.
And then Presto is asked to make some burgers appear, but he instead pulls a cow out of his hat, which has very Bullwinkle feel to this gag here. Presto with his stupid hat, he's kind of funny as the nerd in the group that they're asking him, like, can you just make stuff? And I like that he pulled out a bunch of turkeys. He's like, can I help it if my hat thought it was Thanksgiving? That's a cute little line.
It's kind of smart of them to have their wizard character, not be entirely reliable because magic is kind of, a blank check in a lot of cases. So they kind of have to smartly make sure that their wizard character, can't do everything.
Yeah, like the Dungeon Master has wizardy kind of stuff. And we also, with the Merlin character, not really Merlin, but the Merlin in this, he also can just kind of do anything. So you do need to show that, like, this magic kid can't just pull out a portal from his hat because he's not very good at it yet.
And that's kind of a conflict in this episode, but we'll get to that when we get to that.
Yeah. I do have to ask, like, did Presto teleport a regular cow from somewhere else, or did he create life by pulling this cow
I was
out of
wondering
his
that,
hat?
yeah.
Well, if we followed the normal rules of D&D, I believe how the logic goes is that you just summon something from another place, like with Summon Nature's Ally and stuff. So,
okay.
Yeah, he probably just summoned it from another location.
That cow is fucked.
Yeah.
It's just going to die there.
Seems like he put the cow back in his hat since he conjures it later, but...
Oh, that's true. Yeah, I guess it's the gag they go out on.
Which there's not, it doesn't seem like there's, well, no, there's horses in this world, so I guess it could be, he didn't get a cow from planet Earth, he got a cow from that universe. But yeah, and then Eric kind of goofs on him too for how how Presto sucks. He's got a problem with confidence, old Presto does. And so yes, they arrive at Merlin's floating castle. It takes them a minute to realize where the castle is, which again, we just did Korgoth, and there's a floating wizard castle in that one
That's
too.
right. Floating castle's always really cool. Ask Miyazaki.
I just like too, both of them have like, a bunch of non-magic people walking into a floating wizard's castle like, let's steal shit. Let's take all this stuff.
I do like the lie. I mean, we're setting up the dichotomy of Bobby and Merlin, right?
Mm-hmm,
and finally, we'll meet a real wizard.
Yeah.
Not like you piece of shit.
And even he agrees, like, face it, as a wizard, I'm no whiz. And fortunately, as they arrive to the magic ladder that'll take them up to the castle, they are able to leave Uni behind and just go like, no, screw that.
You stay behind and make Frank Welker noises.
Thank God.
Yeah. Oh, man, if that Uni was making noises the whole time they were there. But yes, here's their arrival at Merlin's castle.
Wait down there, Uni. I'll come back for you. I promise. Wow.
My folks have a place just like this in the mountains. Wish I was there.
Sometimes we wish you were there too, Eric. Remember what the Dungeon Master said about Venger.
We should recognize him by his white hair. Drawbridge is up.
Hello! Can't you just swim across the moat?
Well, maybe you'd like to try.
Oh, no thanks. I've never cared much for skydiving.
This looks like my department.
Then she jumps across with her magic, which her thing is pretty damn magic. It kind of can do anything, that pole.
That quarterstaff.
Ah, right.
Not a buck and a quarterstaff, just a quarterstaff.
Daffy had a better deal on his. But I love Presto's kind of snide thing to Eric. Like, sometimes we wish you were there too, Eric. Like, in general, they're all like, why do we even have this jerk here? Let's let him just starve if he doesn't shut up.
They need to realize there are no cops here. You can just murder Eric.
I feel like the Dungeon Master too is the parental guidance figure who's just like there to make sure the kids don't like start making out at any point or do anything wrong.
This could turn into Lord of the Flies at any second with all these children.
That's why he gave Bobby the most powerful weapon, so he cannot be like killed by Eric. But yeah, that now I'm imagining a very dark fanfic where like Eric murders Bobby to get his thing.
Oh.
But so yes, there is a lot of exposition as they do stuff in this, but I will say that fits with the Dungeons and Dragons real life playing of constantly explaining your actions out loud. At least that fits.
I never thought of it like that, but you're right.
I mean, I don't think they're doing it for that reason. They're doing it because it's an 80s cartoon and you have to say out loud every single thing you do. Partially because the animation is not at a good enough level to make it clear what your actions are.
Just like comic books of the age.
Yeah, And again, Evan Erie, he said in the extras too, Evan Erie said like another reason I couldn't take it was I was not only writing for like a variety show, but I was also writing like 11 comic books at the same time too. So he's a productive writer. I think he says he learned that from Jack Kirby because he's like Jack Kirby never rested a day in his life and he would draw things and sometimes in 2 days he'd have a whole comic book done. So
I have to say it's been a long time since I was a regular reader of his blog, but I was reading it like back in the late 90s and it is still called News from Me.
I love that. I love that his blog is stuck in that timeline. And so, yes, they get down the drawbridge. They get inside. They meet old Merlin. And I forgot the whole white hair thing, which is, I mean, it's barely a riddle. I got to say, the kids are pretty stupid not to understand what's going on here.
So the thing that frustrates me, and we'll get to this later, is he actually even says it's a white hair at some point, which, if you know who he is, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, he shouldn't directly say, not a rabbit, a hair.
Wink.
Like, right.
Also, I don't know if we covered this earlier, but the DM is like, you'll know Venger by his white hair.
Yeah.
It's like, no, he's always covered up.
Right, yeah. Well,
like, yeah.
Well, and he has a wig. Like, he takes off when they see him, they're like, oh, hey, he has white hair. No, I can't grow hair.
Right.
See, it's a wig.
But I mean, the actual Venger, you don't see his hair.
Oh,
ever.
yeah, that's right.
It's always covered up. So, like, even the clue is bad. Like, you'll have to take his cowl off to see his white hair. I think there are more distinctive features on Venger than the white hair.
It's a complicated riddle.
It makes me think, like, maybe Mark didn't know what the character would look like. The Avenger character would look like, possibly.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, again, this was written in 2 days, this episode, so... And so, yes, they meet up with him. He convinces them that he's fine, everything's cool, and he's got a wig on, that he doesn't really have white hair, that he's constantly petting a rabbit, which, again, the rabbit doesn't lead to much other than just like a bad pun. Well, not even a bad pun, like just a non-reveal.
I thought, like, what I thought the reveal was going to be is that Merlin was the rabbit he transformed into a rabbit. It would have been much better. It's not just some rabbit he carries around to give his identity away.
Yeah, why would Venger just carry around a hair for no... I just don't know. But yes, Merlin explains the whole deal to the kids.
Many years ago, the land of Helix fought back against one who would conquer them. The defeated conqueror vowed vengeance.
Dungeon Master told us this already.
Yes, but he did not tell you that one year Merlin appeared, cast a spell, and his good magic drove out evil. The dragons were gone forever.
Aw, brother.
And every year, Helix celebrates the defeat of the winged terrors.
Hey, great story there, but I didn't come to listen to fairy tales. Now, if you're not going to help us get home, I'm leaving. On second thought...
Oh no, it's Tiamat. Back for seconds, Dragon? Bobby! You don't scare me.
This time you'll not escape me.
Tiamat is a good device because you're like, we need tension. Tiamat appears.
You're
Bam.
right, yeah.
And also, I'm with Bobby, like, we've heard this already.
Yeah.
Like, listen to you little shits. Let me get to the point.
Also, Merlin, why did you refer to yourself in the third person back there? No reason.
Right? Like, why?
Lots of people do that.
Why isn't Venger at least pretending to be Merlin better, I like that Bobby is written like a realistic kid who would just say something rude like, duh, we've heard this. And same with Eric, just like, yeah, nice story. Who cares? I'm out of here.
I feel like he is like Eric Trump or something. That's what he strikes me as. Like this rich guy who talks like a New York wise guy.
That's true, yeah. And yeah, the visions he's showing them will pay off later. Like this, I think too that one thing Mark Evanier wanted to do in his original script was, this show is called Dungeons and Dragons. I gotta have more than one dragon in this show, and I gotta have a dungeon. Like I have to have these things in the first episode.
Does it count as more than one dragon if it's one dragon with multiple heads?
Oh well, there's more dragons summoned later.
Oh right,
too,
right, yeah.
Though. There's multiple dragons, though. I guess there is only one dungeon.
Those dragons don't have arms, which means they're technically wyverns.
Ooh, you got me. You got me.
And the show fucked up there.
I hope somebody's fired for that blunder.
Also, by the way you compared Tiamat, she's like in the Simpsons clip show where Snake constantly shows up to point a gun at them and then leave again. Yeah. But I love the animation of Tiamat breaking through walls. Like every time it breaks through a door or a wall, it's just so cool looking.
I mean, if you think about it, Tiamat's got to be like hugely problematic to, animate, because you got like big dragon body and you got like I think it's like 6 heads on her.
And then plus the scaly underbelly that's so heavy in line weight. Yeah, there's some moments where if you look too closely, it kind of is like an endless dragon. There's no end to its underbody, but that's, I think, why Tiamat kind of flashes by pretty quick in other shots.
And they engineer like a real Scooby-Doo trap to get this thing out of the way.
Yeah, that's another plotting note I have there. So when they're getting chased by Tiamat and it's smashing around, and they also come to a dungeon that's somehow in a floating castle, but I guess a wizard did it. Let's say that.
Literally.
Then they have, for the trick, Presto lays out a carpet that will then trick Tiamat into walking over and falling into. But if the point of the episode is that Presto can't do a good job, he shouldn't be able to summon that carpet. He should actually like screw up again.
Yeah, if he needs to lose his confidence.
Yeah.
It should be like a really small carpet, and then Merlin, or Venger as we come to know, should like increase its size.
Yeah, that fits in more with the plot they're telling, of which they barely do either, of the apprentice relationship they're trying to set up with them. And another thing I noticed was that Tiamat is Welker there when it shows up and says, it's the classic Welker raspy voice that's like kinda his Megatron. It's kind of his Megatron. But in the opening sound, and I'll play it again here, when Tiamat speaks in the first scene, it's a different voice.
Look! Who dares awaken me?
See, that's a woman doing it.
It
That's
sounds,
not Welker, yeah.
like a really processed woman voice.
Yeah. I mean, Tiamat is a woman, so maybe they just got the one voice and then they realized, oh, we need her to say something here. Frank, you do like a million voices.
In the Dragon's Graveyard one, it's Frank again, so I think they liked more of the Frank growl, but I kind of wish they'd have kept that woman's voice just to keep the, the goddessness of Tiamat. Like, I like, though, that the kids do call it, like a woman. They use female pronouns for it, which is correct for Tiamat. But yes, they trap the dragon in a dungeon, so you get both flavors of it in this show.
Dungeon in Dragon. All right, Dragon in Dungeon, sorry.
And then the kids, again, Merlin straight up tells them, this is a white hare. It's like, you stupid kids.
Hare also could mean it's a kind of rabbit, you see. Yeah, like he underlines it so much. I was like, oh, duh.
To be fair, this is actually pretty on par with the intelligence of most players whenever you give them a riddle in an actual D&D game.
That's true, yeah. I've seen this happen with game masters in my time where they think, I made up a very easy to figure out riddle, but then all of the players go like, I don't know either. Let's kill that guy. Like, that's what ends up happening.
Or they overthink it.
Yeah.
They just think it's like some kind of like math puzzle or something.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I like the moment where they have no time to linger in this heavy moment. Like, oh, what if Presto leaves us?
Yeah.
What? It can't happen. Oh, farewell, your friend is staying.
It feels like an intense. If it's
I
not
laughed
intentional,
out loud.
it's incredibly funny. Yes, yeah. If they had pro-social messages from CBS, I think they should have the message that friends should not let their friends stay with a guy they just met forever.
Yeah.
After meeting.
There's some serious stranger danger happening in this scene, and
Right?
I'm not a fan of it.
Yes, yeah.
It's like, I'm your father now.
But yes, Presto is got a new teacher.
Thank you, my child. But it's not a rabbit, it's a hare. A white hare. You saved an old magician's life.
Saved your life? I thought you were supposed to live forever.
No. I'm 70 years young, my lad. The age where I begin searching for one to teach my secrets to. One like this one.
That one? Me?
Indeed. I saw your wizardry and was quite impressed. I can teach you all my magic, but only if you stay here for the rest of your life.
Gee. Listen, if Merlin's not gonna help us get home, I say we shove off for that Helix place, huh?
Eric, we have to wait for Presto.
You don't think Presto would stay with Merlin, do you?
No way! Presto would never leave us.
Farewell.
I love that. In your face, kid.
Presto would never leave us. Farewell. And there's not even a tearful goodbye moment. They just walk away and go like, do you think he should have done that? He wanted to stay.
Merlin doesn't even underline like the, I guess, severity or seriousness of like, this is going to be forever, kid. He's like, and you just have to stay here for the rest of your life. That's it.
You'll know all the magic, but you will die here. So
with me.
Yeah, with me.
It feels weird that they would even put forever in there when Merlin could just say, you'll have to stay with me for the foreseeable future or something more vague like that.
Yeah, or he just say like typical wizard school takes 5 years. So, it honestly, he just needs Presto for an afternoon. That's all he needs. Why bring in, it honestly sounds like Presto would be more likely to say no if you tell him forever.
Also, I just realized something. Did he mention in like his initial rambling about when Merlin, the real Merlin, banished the dragons? Because if so, when he mentions he's 70 years old.
Yeah, that should be another tip-off, which also Venger isn't 70, so he's not even telling the truth about himself. That doesn't make much sense, no. And yeah, they're all blaming themselves for Presto staying. Like, if we were nicer to him, like, I don't know, that also feels like a kid's cartoon lesson, like, be nicer to your friends or they'll fall in with the wrong gang like an evil wizard. But there's a good bit, too, of as Presto's training begins, Merlin tells him, like, all right, just, make this cauldron, but don't read this book. It's got all the answers, but don't read it. I'm out of here.
Just stir this cauldron until you die of natural causes. Goodbye.
It seems like bad writing, but it's actually Venger intentionally just holding his hand until he does what he wants.
And whatever you do, do not animate this broom to do your chores for you. We all know how this goes.
Speaking of animation, the animators droop pupils on every eyeball in that jar of spider eyes, which above and beyond there.
Too much work.
And so Presto decides to read the book anyway. He finds what seems to be a go-home spell, but when he does it, it actually conjures out of smoke a whole bunch of wyverns, actually, now I know. And so they all pop out of it. It's some good animation on the dragons transforming out of smoke from the cauldron. And they're smashing through a wall. Again, this is just the dragons smashing through walls show. But then there's another bit that feels weird to me where it's supposed to be, the commercial break danger thing, and it zooms in on him going like, Merlin, help! But there's no music. Like in a Marvel production, they would definitely have like a ba 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 kind of music behind it. Instead, it's played silent.
Yeah, it's kind of awkward.
It feels like somebody forgot to put music there or something. And so we come back from the break. Presto is able to escape those dragons and tell Merlin what went wrong, and Merlin reveals his evil plan.
Merlin, I didn't mean to do it. I'm really sorry. So, you were trying to create a spell that would get you and your friends back home, correct?
Yes, and I'm sorry, but the dragons.
Ah, yes, the dragons. I switched the spells. Only good magic could undo Merlin's spell and release the dragons. So I had to trick you into undoing Merlin's spell.
But you're Merlin, aren't you?
Merlin hasn't lived for 1,000 years. Fool! You know me as Venger!
Oh, no!
I will use the magic of your hat to add to my power as my winged terrors destroy the town of Helix.
Oh, no.
That's so great. Yeah.
I like how his tone is just, shucks.
Right. Not I've doomed the world or I'm going to die. I'm just like, man, whoops. Yeah. I also love the animation of how Venger daintily takes the cap off his head, like, well, this is my hat now.
He really yoinked it off of his head.
He's being nice to Presto. He should just break the kid's neck and take that, but in fact, he even puts him safely in a room,
I am very powerful, young boy, but there is one above even me. Censors.
Yes.
And he's just got a bone to pick with his town for some reason, right?
Yeah, he just wants to see the town burn, man. And I mean, this whole sequence here is totally out of, The Hobbit, like of the Smaug's attack on the town.
The desolation of Smaug?
Yes, yeah, that is the desolation itself right there on screen.
Yeah, I assume that these are all halflings, because, I mean, what else could they be? I guess they could be gnomes.
They are definitely Hobbit-ish, which, that there's a lot of stuff that Tolkien didn't copyright, but Hobbits he owns, so that's why you have halflings, right? Is that's the official race in D&D?
Yeah, that's what they're officially called, halflings.
Okay, yeah, but they definitely are little people in a very Hobbit-like town having a Hobbit-y celebration of like the harvest or whatever. And yeah, the kids are having some fun there. And then when the kids finally figure it out, it's they have to hit it so hard just so that the dumbest child watching the show can get the clue.
Zoom in on the dictionary definition of hair.
Oh no!
What is it?
The dragons! The dragons are coming back!
I still don't know why we were sent here, Mayor, but at least we got to meet Merlin on the way.
How could you? Merlin died 1,000 years ago, soon after casting a spell that vanquished Venger's flying dragons.
Merlin died?
Duh.
But we met him, and he said he was only 70.
Mayor! I saw them! The dragons are returning! Sound the alarm! Take shelter!
We have to go back and get Merlin to help.
I don't think that guy we met was Merlin.
But he looked like Merlin, standing there stroking his white rabbit.
Not his rabbit, his hair.
His white hair!
Everybody!
Dungeon Master said we'd know Venger by his white hair. We thought he meant hair, like on his head. Then Presto is alone with Venger. We've got to save him.
And find out how to stop these dragons. Let's find Bobby and Eric.
And they couldn't hire one adult woman for that sidekick.
Right,
like,
yeah.
The dragons are coming! Oh, no!
Yeah. And her design is also very 1980s and not very politically correct.
No. I believe there was a title for that character we won't say on the air.
No, let's say Romani. Let's say Romani fortune teller.
But like, they underline white hair like 3 times. I forgot it wasn't over after they all say it together.
Yes, yeah, they have to.
Hair meaning rabbit.
And then Presto will still explain that to them when they show up too.
Also, thanks, Diana, for reminding us that he was stroking that rabbit.
Yes, that's right. Which I guess Venger just likes stroking a rabbit because
there's nothing to it.
When it cuts back to Presto going like, I suck, he's petting the rabbit. It just is a hair.
It's the little things in life.
You know what, Bob? I agree with you. I think what should have happened in this episode is that it was revealed that the rabbit was Merlin and that, and that Venger turned him into a rabbit, and then he couldn't turn back into Merlin or whatever at the end of the episode or something like that.
Yeah, that'd be a better ending. And they're like, oh, thank you, kids. I couldn't eat another carrot as long as I live. And they all laugh. And then Uni goes,
yeah, that's great. That's a great ending. I guess the only plot problem I could see there is it would be the same as that Sonic episode we do. They just go like, well, Merlin, since you're alive, can you teleport us home?
Goodbye.
Yes. You have to. But yeah, they leave out of Helix. They get on 3 horses, which I only spotted it in my second viewing, but Eric, like, very you can see he's riding alone on a horse, as he will insist on doing at the end of this episode. And they leave the town. Helix, the amount of time it takes them to get back to Merlin's place, Helix is surely cinders. Like, they are not safe.
Yeah, there are like 6 cabins in this little town, too.
Well, and also when they get back to Merlin's place, the magic ladder is still there.
Yeah, why do you leave it there?
Yeah, pretty dumb on Venger. Maybe let's say the Dungeon Master set that up for them, I guess. And so, yes, they find Presto, and they decide they need to work together.
Presto! Hank! Am I glad to see you? Merlin's not Merlin. He's Venger. He stole my hat and all my powers. Worse, he tricked me into undoing Merlin's spell.
The town of Helix is being destroyed right now. You've got to cast Merlin's spell again.
Me? I'm no Merlin.
And you will not cast another spell tonight. I have the wizard's hat. Hand over the rest of your objects of power.
We can't do that, Venger.
You have no choice.
Bobby, use your club.
Whatever you say, Hank.
He smashes up Merlin's library too.
So yeah, Venger sucks. He's like overcome by books falling off a shelf.
That's true, yeah. I mean, the kids do have pretty powerful weapons. Though I also forget the Venger's, like, biggest plan is, like, I will steal all your stuff. Like, he just wants to rob children, pretty much.
I mean, it does play into the player's fear of having their stuff stolen.
Oh, that is the greatest damage that can happen to you.
I guess what's missing from the series is, like, what is Venger's deal? Like, what's his MO? Like, if Venger collects the 6 items you have, the world will end or something. Like, he needs, like, a bigger goal. Like, the villain needs a bigger goal instead of just being evil.
Well, I do recall, at least, I think there was an episode where he plans on going to their world to conquer it or something like that.
Yes, yeah.
That should be his overarching goal, because in this one, he's just like, you know what? I hate Helix. Get out of here.
Greater motivation is added in later episodes, yeah. But here he's just a guy who wants to steal stuff and kill people. That's kind of his whole plan. And so, yes, Venger 2, another great bit of animation when Diana dodges with like a backflip somersault. That's really great animation. Yeah. And so, yes, Venger needs to be kept busy while they, Presto and Hank, go to try to undo the magic. And I like Eric's, again, very snide, like, keep him busy. What are we supposed to do? Tell him jokes? Good. At least he's funny in being the shitty guy. And so they then run down a hallway to try to escape Venger. I also like that Quarterstaff, again, can do anything. She threw it like a boomerang to put out all the lights in a hallway. Like, it's incredible what that Quarterstaff can do.
I did like Venger coming in with these lasers he's shooting out.
Yeah.
Just vaporize all those kids.
And you can even see, like, it lights the hall. That's a good thing. I think it's a rare time where a character doesn't say what happened out loud, but they think that they've tricked Venger by putting out all the lights, and then he's shooting bright white lasers at them that light up the whole room, and they're like, oh man, we can't even hide in darkness. Like, but shockingly, no character just straight up says what's happening. And so, as the characters are getting cornered by him, they realize there's only one way to get rid of Venger, and that's to free a dragon from a dungeon.
I don't know if I could do this, Hank. I mess up every magic trick I try.
You can do it, Presto. We've got to stop the dragons before they destroy Helix.
This game is ended. It is time I eliminated you once and for all.
Remember the one thing that Venger's afraid of? Tiamat the dragon!
Tiamat the dragon? You're gonna let the dragon loose? Don't we have enough problems?
Eric, stop talking and start helping.
I don't believe this.
I will add your magic to mine, and then destroy you and your meddlesome friends. Stay away from me, dragon!
Let's get out of here!
You have won for now, but I shall win in the end.
Real Skeletor speech there.
His natural fear of Tiamat. I mean, shouldn't we all be afraid of Tiamat? Really?
So, yeah. And Tiamat's got a real mad on for him.
I mean, it's kind of confusing what Venger's exact power scale is, because I believe in just the episode after this, he one of his minions is Loth, who is, the goddess of Drow.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, his, he can definitely shapeshift and throw lasers, and I think he's got wings. He can fly too. It's not very well defined though, his power level. No,
I believe he gets a minion later on who's just a shadow.
Yes, yeah, that's the in the I saw him in the Dragon's Graveyard one, where that's the minion who he tells him, like, in the beginning, if that wall of ice just smashes the kids, go grab their stuff after they're dead. Like, Venger is very direct on that stuff. But yes, he runs away, but I guess to keep him as the series villain, he needs to say a line like, I'm not beaten forever, I'll be back. Like, just so you know, that's not a different villain every week.
I forget, does he like disappear through a rotating wall or something?
He kind of just goes through a doorway.
Okay.
And then Tiamat just like keeps smashing through other walls. I can watch that dragon smash walls all day long. And so Presto does an incantation over a cauldron of magic, which I gotta think Christian groups definitely would have hated this one. This is literally teaching a child how to do Satan's magic here. And so they save the day. Presto is able to use his powers to get rid of the dragons. They stop destroying Helix, and Presto gets to have a nice moment of like, wow, my friend supported me and I did good. Yay. When they all talk to each other with him saying like, well, this is why I did it, guys. I'm sorry. That's a real Wheel of Morality vibe there.
It's true.
You didn't even say goodbye to them at the beginning. Or
Yeah.
Not the beginning, you know.
Yeah. We'll also talk about them being stupid. Presto knows that in this castle they are in is a book that does have a go home spell in it, even if he was given the wrong one by Merlin. Maybe keep that spell book and see for other stuff.
Oh no, the rope ladder's gone. Whoops.
Yeah, they're like, oh, we forgot. Let's go back. Oh, nope, rope ladder's gone too. Can't do it. Whoopsie. Like, these dumb kids.
Dungeon Master's just on top of the cloud, and he's just pulling up the rope ladder going, hee. That'll show them.
That's right. Yeah, I
Trying to have hope.
I have to think every time something prevents them from going home, it's just the Dungeon Master off screen, because
He just loves fucking with these kids.
I mean, the Dungeon Master also in this last clip here, he has to fix a plot hole, which is they never get back Presto's hat. Like, Venger steals it and they never find it again. And why would Venger give it back? And yet then the DM goes like, no, I got it here. It's like, oh, well, isn't that convenient? Nice.
He cheated.
What should have happened is that Tiamat should have like swatted Venger, and then he drops the hat after he gets like pressed up against a wall or something.
Yeah, and then Presto gets it back, or somebody goes like give Presto some of the activity there, make it his choice to get back his hat instead. Instead, the DM just shows up in a very Looney Tunes way of like, well, now I wouldn't say that. But yes, let's hear the final clip.
Lose this, wizard?
My hat! Hey, everybody! I'm back in the magic business.
Oh, great. Listen, Dungeon Master, while you're returning things, how about returning us to... He did it again!
I'll never be that good a magician. Well, I know a place where they think you're as good as Merlin himself.
Yeah, Helix! That's right, Presto. In Helix, you're a hero.
I am? Then let's go. Climb aboard, Eric.
Are you kidding? I don't ride with anyone else. I want a steed of my own.
Presto, would you produce something for Eric to ride on?
Sure.
What? I'm not riding on any cow. No way. I don't ride anything that gives milk. Hey, come back here. Who asked you?
I saw that joke coming 1,000 miles away. I was clearing the runway for the cow joke.
Though that lick in his shocked reaction, like that is the most anime shot in this whole episode.
That was the most anime face.
Yeah.
But that Eric thing was a real like, I said let me have it kind of setup.
Yeah, it was either going to be the cow licks him or he says the line and then he just gets sprayed with milk.
It was definitely a real what a revolt in development moment. Yeah, but a little sloppy writing. It feels like a pilot written in 2 days because the DM again just has to show up and be like, hey, here's this, gotta go. Though at least Eric, if Mark didn't like Eric, he at least wrote him having like the funniest lines of like, why are we doing this again with this guy? Like he feels like the most realistic and actual like fed up person trapped in another world would be.
I think they're just hanging out with Eric because he's a rich kid.
Sure, yeah.
In the real world, they're like, oh man, his dad can get us into places. He's got a cool car.
Totally.
He's got drugs.
He probably bought them all tickets to that amusement park, you know? Like
his dad probably owns that amusement park.
Oh, I bet you're right. Yeah. If they have a winter house that's basically a castle, they've got to be pretty rich. And then the credits are fun little credits. I like the little music they use, though. Again, it's all this off-the-rack music. I just am so... I didn't watch this show, but I watched all of those old Spider-Man cartoons, and hearing the same music from it and from the G.I. Joe ones, it's just a real mind fuck. I'm like, wait, what? It's really throwing me off. But the credits are going over like the amusement park at night. That's a nice visual.
Yeah.
But yeah, this was a fun one to watch. I think if I was a kid watching this in 1983, this is 10 times better than pretty much any other show that was on Saturday mornings then. Like, I probably, if I was 10, I'd have probably liked Pac-Man a little more, just be based on the mascotiness of it.
Yeah, I could see why this would be important for the Gen Xers who grew up with not a lot of great cartoon choices, and I think they did the best they could with the license. And it does seem fit, kind of edgy for a 1983 cartoon.
They got as much by the censors as they could in this show, I think. And in the later episodes show, the writers are trying even more to get stuff in there. And on top of that, like, I do think the character designs of all the kids are good. Like, these are memorable looking, specific kids, and they adapted to their styles well. Like, yeah, it's for its time, I think it's not a bad show.
Yeah. I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's kind of frustrating that this is the only D&D cartoon that's ever existed, because it feels like, again, D&D is such a cultural touchstone. It's so memorable and well beloved that, I know that we're getting like a Critical Role animated series coming out, and that's going to be something, I guess. But yeah, it just feels kind of, frustrating as a longtime fan of tabletop RPGs that this is the only real, cartoon that we ever got. And it feels like, why is that? Like, there should be at least one more D&D cartoon out there, and not a shitty live action movie.
Yeah. You would. I know that Magic: The Gathering, I believe, is actually getting an animated series on Netflix soon. Yeah, this was this was announced back late last year that Magic: The Gathering is getting a Netflix live action series that the Russo brothers are working on too. So it's from the Russos of the most expensive movies of all time. I mean, those guys are good. I've just been watching. They have a new, because they can't make movies now, so they're doing the podcast thing too, just like
they're gonna give up once they get legitimate employment.
But they're really, I really actually like their show, the Russo Brothers Pizza Film School, I think it's called. They're fun little videos, but I think they do a good job with Magic: The Gathering. So who knows? Maybe D&D will get a similar Netflix style, or all these streaming services, they need content.
Yeah, I guess Harmon Quest, we didn't mention that. That's the closest to this, although they can't say D&D, right? They have to say fantasy role playing. I think they even make a joke about people on the show, like guests, trying to say Dungeons and Dragons. Like, oh, don't you mean fantasy role playing?
That's right. I forgot that. Yeah.
So I guess maybe if you want a show like this for adults, Harmon Quest is as close as you'll get, right?
Yeah, I have not seen that show, unfortunately, but I might go take a look at it now that you've recommended it. And I'm just thinking, like, yeah, you could get like the guys that made She-Ra or the Voltron animated series to make a new D&D cartoon, and there's a lot more you can work with nowadays, now that second edition has come along and introduced a whole bunch of lore to the setting, and we have all these new classes and characters that we could do with. Like, you could have a series where a bunch of kids have to go to different D&D settings, like they have to go to Faerun and they meet Dritz Durundin and Artemis Entree, or they could go to Ravenloft and encounter Strahd von Zurovich and some of the monsters that dwell there. There's just so much potential with D&D as a brand, and it just feels frustrating that all that we really have to show for this in terms of media outside of the Baldur's Gate games, I guess, is just this, cartoon that's, it's good for a 1983 cartoon, but it's still just a 1983 cartoon.
Yeah, I forgot those Planescape games are also D&D, aren't they?
Oh, yeah. There's so many, like, D&D variants and stuff. So.
That's Planescape is another setting that I think would work very well for a cartoon or something.
Well, awesome. That was a fun discussion, and it was neat to go back to this, something that was very new to me. But Devin, do you have anything you want to plug? You're one of our top-level patrons. We appreciate your patronage, of course. Is there anything you want to throw out there for our listeners to check out?
Yes, there is. In fact, one of my good friends, Jose Ryan Garcia, is actually a tabletop writer. He actually does work with Onyx Path Entertainment, who works with White Wolf, and he has written for several World of Darkness books.
Ooh, boy, that's cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, and he's also recently worked with Greg Stolze, who also does a lot of World of Darkness books, on a game called Termination Shock, which you can buy right now on DriveThruRPG.com. And, go give that a purchase if you're interested in, tabletop RPGs and you like sci-fi settings. Termination Shock is there. And he's also done a lot of work on, World of Darkness games, as I said before. So he's done things like Oak and Ash and Thor and the Changeling, the Lost games. He's worked on Geist the Sin Eaters. He's also worked on Beast, which is unfortunate because that game's not very good. But yeah, he's done a lot of work on tabletop RPGs, and you should go look at some of his cadre on Drive-Thru RPG.
That's awesome. Thanks. I will check those out myself. I appreciate, Devin, you were able to give us. So if we had ever done this one, just me and Bob, we'd have had none of these insights into actually playing D&D or these specifics on it. And I especially liked geeking out with you on my tabletop past. It was a lot of fun. So thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Well, you're welcome. You're welcome. I love tabletop RPGs. My favorite edition of D&D is 4th edition, which means that I'm a complete weirdo. And yeah, it's fun. Tabletop RPGs are fun. And if I can give any recommendations to people out there, play different tabletop RPGs. Don't just settle for D&D because it's the only one that you know and you recognize. Go out and experiment, because trust me, a lot of games out there are way more fun than you give them credit for, and they're also a lot more simpler than you give them credit for. So just go out and try whatever interests you. Like, there are games out there like Double Cross, which is like a super anime game, and there are also games like the Powered by the Apocalypse games, and those are also very simple and fun and entertaining to play with.
Awesome. Man, I will check those out. But thank you so much.
So thanks again to Devin for being a great guest on this show and supporting us. And if you listening out there want to support us as well, please go to patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons. And if you sign up for $5 a month, you'll get all these episodes 1 week at a time and ad-free, and also access to everything behind the $5 paywall. That includes all of our limited miniseries, the most recent of which was Talking Mission Hill. We went over the entire only season of Mission Hill using this treatment. And behind that $5 paywall, there is so much other stuff going on: interviews, end of season wrap-ups, and deleted scene specials for Talking Simpsons. And if you sign up immediately, you'll have access to all of it the second you sign up at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons. But if you sign up for $10 a month, you'll get all of that stuff plus one mega long podcast once a month, only for patrons of that level and higher. What is that, Henry?
That is our monthly What a Cartoon Movie podcast, which you get to hear an extended preview of each month in the free feed. But if you want to hear the full podcast, where me and Bob often for over 4 hours talk about a different animated feature film once a month, then you got to sign up at $10 a month at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons. You'll get to hear September's when it goes live, and if you sign up now, you can hear our most recent ones too, like the one we just did for the Ghost in the Shell classic, or the Black Cauldron, the Disney bomb that almost killed the studio, plus tons of others in the back catalog. We're inching closer to 100 hours of just What a Cartoon Movie podcasts alone, almost 2 full years of podcasts in that back catalog you will get access to if you are a $10 patron or you up your $5 pledge to $10 a month at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons.
So as for me, I've been one of the hosts, Bob Mackey. You can find me on Twitter as Bob Servo, and my other podcast is Retronauts. That is a classic gaming podcast about old video games. Find it wherever you find podcasts, or go to patreon.com/Retronauts, and you'll get 2 bonus episodes every month that aren't available on the free feed. Henry, how about you?
Hey, I'm the other host, Henry Gilbert. Follow me on Twitter at HENEREYG. You'll stay in the loop about cool stuff going on in my life if you follow me there. And if you're following me on Twitter, follow at Talk Simpsons Pod. That is the official Twitter account of this podcast and its sister podcast, Talking Simpsons. Anytime new stuff heads up on the free feeds, on the Patreon, or we ever have any cool new t-shirts we're selling, you'll hear about that and much more if you are following on Twitter at Talk Simpsons Pod.
Thanks so much for listening, folks. We'll see you next week for the free extended preview of this month's What a Cartoon Movie, and we will see you then.
Beware, young adventurers.
Wait, Dungeon Master, you can't just leave us.
Huh?
He's gone!
Whack!
I hate it when he does that.
I think it's neat.